Are you afraid of spiders? What about a man-sized demonic spider that's lurking in your room walls, waiting to take its revenge? Peter is a 10-year-old boy with a shy and introverted personality. He doesn't have any siblings and lives in a big house with his apparently loving parents, Mark and Carol. Peter doesn't talk to anyone at school and often gets bullied. His parents are always concerned about bringing up Peter as an obedient child, but they never try to understand what he lacks in his life. He sleeps alone in his creepy room and often feels like someone is secretly watching over him. One night, Peter hears a sudden knocking on his room walls. He immediately gets up in fear and rushes to his parents' room. They both get worried and come to check his room by themselves. Carol presses her ear against the wall and tries her best to detect any sound, but nothing seems to be there. She tells Peter that he's an over-imaginative boy and all the scary things he claims to hear are just in his head. The next day at his school, a substitute teacher joins in. Her name is Miss Devine, and she's a really kind and considerate woman. Later that day, the class bully Brian warns Peter that he'll mess with him during the recess. Out of fear, the poor boy keeps sitting in the class alone. Miss Devine tries to cheer him up and even helps him get rid of the spider on his desk. She asks him about what he's going to dress as in the upcoming Halloween, but Peter doesn't reply. He never went out trick-or-treating like other kids before, but maybe his parents will allow it now. Thinking this, he asks for parents' permission, but they refuse. Peter questions why he can't while all of his class fellows are enjoying the festival. Mark suggests to Carl that they should reveal the actual reason to Peter. A few years ago, when Peter wasn't born yet, a young girl disappeared in their neighborhood during Halloween night. It was a traumatic experience for all the neighbors, and some of them are still scared of it happening to their child. That's why Peter's parents are so possessive about him. Poor kid understands the situation and doesn't protest further. As the night sets in, Peter starts hearing the voices again in his room. This time it clearly sounds like a girl calling Peter's name. He doesn't respond and runs to his father. Mark checks the walls and guesses that it must be some rats. The next morning, he helps Peter in bringing rat poison and spreading it around the house. Peter feels sad for killing the rats like this, but Mark tells him that sometimes he has to take difficult decisions just to protect his family. This doesn't help Peter much, and he's still afraid of the mysterious voices. Even in school, he draws his room with a "Help Me" sign. Ms. Devine finds it really alarming and goes to Peter's house to talk to her mother. Carol seems to mind her arrival and treats her in a cold way. She says that it's just Peter's weird imagination. Later, she confronts Peter with his drawing and scolds him for asking help from strangers. Peter knows his parents will never understand, so he accepts that it's just a random drawing. He hears the voices again, which request Peter to be her friend. Peter accepts the proposal and starts talking to the unknown voice daily. During his school's Halloween activity, Peter makes a cute pumpkin head. He loves it like a friend and carries him around. Brian spots him and destroys Peter's pumpkin just for fun. The poor boy keeps crying all night. The girl's voice in his room motivates him to take revenge. The next day at school, the teacher makes Brian apologize to Peter, but Peter is determined to take revenge. As the girl's voice told him, Peter pushed Brian down the stairs. He gets expelled from school and his parents scold him as well. Carol tries to ask her son about his behavior, but Mark has already decided to punish him. He tells Peter that he's grounded, but not in his room. They have a secret door behind the fridge that leads to a dark basement. Carol tells Peter that they are doing this because they love him and want him to repent of his mistake. The poor kid is left there alone, and a few days pass like this. Miss Devine is worried for Peter, but the school principal advises her to stay away from Peter. His parents are overprotective because of the incident that happened in their neighborhood. Miss Devine is still not convinced and delivers Peter's math test as an excuse to see him. Mark invites her inside while holding a hammer in his injured hand. He tells the teacher that they are going to teach Peter at home for a few years. Miss Devine insists on seeing Peter, and it makes Carol angry. She says that Miss Devine is trying to accuse them of mistreating their child. Mark asks the teacher to leave immediately. Peter also hears the argument and bangs at the basement door for help. Unfortunately, Ms. Devine couldn't hear him because of the sound of the washing machine. After a few days, Peter's parents let him get out of the basement and advise him to be a good kid from now on. Peter hears the girl's voice again. This time, Peter demands to see her so he can confirm he's not imagining everything. The girl says she's not in her best form because of living in the walls for years, but Peter still wants to see her. She asks him to rip the wallpaper and reveal the hole behind it. When Peter looks through it, he sees someone's eye. She introduces herself as Sarah and claims to be Peter's elder sister. She warns him to be careful of his parents. They are killers. Peter doesn't seem to believe so. Sarah tells him to check the backyard. He goes back to sleep, but wakes up in the middle of the night by sudden knocking on the door. His mother is wandering in the hallway like a ghost while his father is standing in his room. They both look like they're gonna attack Peter any time. Suddenly the lights turn off and Carol jumps at Peter. He wakes up and realizes it was just a nightmare. He keeps it a secret from his parents and he digs the backyard. Peter finds a human skull and realizes that Sarah was telling the truth. Carol finds him suspicious and rushes to the backyard, but Peter lies that he was just picking up a pumpkin. Later at night, he asks the whole story about the skull, and Sarah reveals that the skull belongs to the girl that went missing on Halloween night. She came to their house asking for a treat, and Sarah secretly requested the girl to help her. But her parents found out and killed the girl to keep Sarah a secret. They will soon kill Sarah as well and will lock Peter in her place. Peter promises to help her sister get out. They will run away from this house and start a new life like a real family. He knows whom to ask for help. Miss Devine had left her phone number on his math test. Peter secretly calls the number, but Carol catches him. She takes him to his room and scolds him for contacting strangers. Suddenly, she notices the hole in the wall and starts to panic. She asks Peter what he has been told and how long it has been going on. Peter doesn't reply, and Carol rushes to talk to Mark. They stay up all night and try to figure out how to handle this matter. The next day, Peter's parents behave normally and don't ask him anything about Sarah's matter. Mark takes him to the backyard and shows him the rotting pumpkins. They have been infected by pests which ruined the whole crop, but they can't keep them anymore. All they can do is bury these rotten pumpkins and look forward to a better crop next year. Mark talks in a creepy tone and explains everything like he was talking about his kids. If one isn't up to the expectations like Sarah was, get rid of it and look forward to the next kid. Peter stays quiet and helps his father in burying the pumpkins. No one can change his mind right now. He's ready to punish his parents and help her sister get free. It's Halloween night, but Carol and Mark seem annoyed by the kids coming at their door. They really hate Halloween. Mark suddenly finds the soup a little weird and asks Carol if she changed the recipe. Then he notices that Peter isn't eating anything. This makes Mark more suspicious and he asks Peter what he did, but Peter only says that he did it because they hurt his sister. Mark tells Carol to call 911, but the phone line is cut off by Peter. He did that before putting the rat poison in the soup. Mark vomits blood and dies on the spot while Carol runs after Peter while holding a knife. Peter kicks her away and she falls off the stairs. The knife stabs her and she lies there lifelessly. Peter grabs the keys, but Carol still warns him not to unlock Sarah. Peter doesn't listen to her and goes to the forbidden room. There's a small door behind the clock. Peter unlocks it, but he starts regretting his decision. Sarah's voice seems heavier and scarier, and makes Peter run away to hide under his bed. She crawls out of the small door like a spider covered in long bunches of hair. Before Sarah can reach Peter, someone knocks at the main door. It's Brian and his cousins who came to beat up Peter for hurting Brian. The door is unlocked, so the boys get inside and start destroying the furniture. Sarah walks around the house like a monster and attacks each boy one by one. She kills all of them and walks into Peter's room. She sits down on his bed and tells her story. She was born as a deformed child and her parents hated her. They couldn't stand seeing her ugly face every day and decided to lock her in the basement. Then Peter was born, a perfect baby that Mark and Carol loved. They gave him all the luxuries while Sarah was suffering in the dark pit. It's time to switch places. Sarah drags Peter and locks him in the small door behind the clock. Meanwhile, Miss Devine is still worried for Peter and can't stop herself from checking on him personally. She reaches his house and steps inside. Miss Devine notices the blood splattered everywhere and tries to call the police. Before she can do that, Sarah attacks her. Miss Devine runs to the door, but then she hears Peter's voice. Miss Devine follows it to his room, but Peter tells her to run away to save her own life. Miss Devine can't leave him behind and breaks the wall. She pulls out Peter and they run downstairs towards the door. Miss Devine gets out in time, but Peter is pulled in by Sarah. She throws him inside the pit and shows her creepy face. Peter is trembling in fear and begs for mercy. Suddenly, he hears Miss Devine's voice. She came back for him. Sarah attacks her, but Peter hangs down on Sarah's long hair and uses them to climb up from the pit. Miss Devine hits the monster with all her might and throws her in the pit. Sarah warns Peter that he will never be able to sleep peacefully at night. They are the same because they killed their parents together. Every creak and every footstep will remind him of Sarah. No matter how far he runs away, she will find him eventually.